Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast. So, Bud, we have dabbled in video, and by no means is this a final product, but we've hopefully continued to take some steps forward. Appreciate all the feedback that we've received on that. Really, for us to not aggressively promote it, had a fantastic response, and for all of you that have gone and subscribed at our YouTube page, know that it is greatly appreciated. And those of you that haven't, if you could make your way over there, give us a subscribe click of the button. If you want to like the video, that's great. But the subscriptions are really our main focus right now. So we'll jump into the podcast. As always, we'll thank our friends at Louisiana Hot Sauce. 3 simple ingredients, 1 fantastic product. Tarpon Cellars, great wine company. Just placed another order with them today. You can use the same coupon code that I used, Nolecast, for 20% off. And, they are great people with great product as well. And we're fortunate to have 2 great sponsors to lead us off in the podcast.
No doubt, man. Really excited to do this one with you tonight. What do you want to do first? You want to go offensive line talk and then talk scrimmage, or do you want to start out with scrimmage talk and then go offensive line?
Yeah, let's do a little scrimmage talk, and then we can make our way over to the planned position preview that we have for tonight.
Yeah, so got to talk to some sources on the team and also some folks who were in attendance for the scrimmage. And I got to tell you, man, I think Jordan Travis is legitimately improving. Now, does that mean they're going to be a good passing team this year if he's the QB? And I'm not saying he's going to be the QB at this point. I still think it's probably Milton. But I do want to compliment him on actually having a nice spring so far, or excuse me, a nice fall camp so far. Solid scrimmage to the extent that anybody on offense was solid. We know the defense pretty much had its way, at least when the ones for the defense were in there. The ones for the offense kind of took advantage of some of the 2s and 3s in the scrimmage later on. But I think he's throwing the football better, man, and that's important because last year, they were not good, especially when they had to throw the football, right? 101st in passing down success rate, 120th in 3rd and long success rate. I mean, that's just not really going to get it done there. They have to be able to throw the football when other teams know that they have to throw the football. Last year, all too often, like they would run it in those situations and they would get yards and they would fill up the stat sheet, but they wouldn't actually have a high success rate in those situations because if you run for 7 on 3rd and 13, it's not really a success. The defense is like, oh, cool, that's cute. Next. But it looks like he's throwing the football a lot better. That was kind of my first takeaway.
Yeah. I had somebody tell me that in their opinion, it was probably 55-45 that Travis was headed in the right direction of winning the starting quarterback. Now, that's, we're all victims of the moment, and everybody loves to make too many extrapolations based off either a small amount of practices or a scrimmage. They said if it was purely based off play, that they thought Jordan Travis would be the quarterback.
Agreed. Yeah.
But the X factor here is Mike Norvell has played against McKenzie Milton, and even post-injury and everything else, Mike Norvell has coached against McKenzie Milton, thrown everything in the world that they could at him, and McKenzie Milton had one of the more impressive performances in front of the head coach, and that's not lost on people. So, we'll just have to see how much those memories of what he did against Memphis stay in Norvell's mind. But like you said, credit to Travis. He appears to have taken some real legitimate steps forward, and so far has been the better of the 2.
And this is not, the QB preview, but I think it is worth noting, and we'll talk about it tonight. Given this offensive line, mobility matters, right? How is McKenzie Milton's foot? Is it good on a week-to-week basis? Is it something that they can trust? And how much does it limit his mobility, right? He's certainly not going to be the guy that he was at UCF, but just how mobile can he be? And how much does that really need to factor in and be a part of this offense? I think they brought McKenzie Milton in for a reason, but Jordan Travis has been the better player so far throughout, a week of fall camp? And nobody I know will tell you different.
Yeah. Malik McClain continues to impress as we just kind of make our way through the offense. I continue to be very emboldened by what I think he's ultimately going to be. You can get yourself burned counting on a true freshman wide receiver, certainly, but it is a guy that at least had the chance to go through spring and continues to show very well. Some of the other offensive players, Jordan Wilson is somebody that we heard a lot of positive remarks about. So far, play has backed that up, had a solid scrimmage as well. That's kind of that of which immediately jumps out at me. Jayshon Corbin continues to play solid, continues to kind of back up some of the optimistic thoughts that has been associated with him for the most part of this fall camp. And then the offensive line, the subject matter of the evening, continues to be kind of hard to grade because they, I don't know. I won't make any great extrapolations.
Some guys aren't taking contact. Some guys are still kind of
exactly
working themselves back into shape.
Some guys came back in great shape. Some guys did not. It's silly that we're here saying this again. I don't know that we can make a whole lot of extrapolations off the O-line or the D-line simply because of kind of where they are right now. So
you're not going to fall for it for like a fourth year in a row. This defensive line is going to be awesome.
I do not think Jonathan Kando will be a first-round pick if I were to go back 365 days. Obviously, Kando is currently wearing a Kansas City Chiefs jersey, but I won't make the same mistakes again. So, fool me once and then fool me again because I think I got fooled 2 years in a row. Not in year 3 here.
I'll tell you another name, Travis Jay.
I'm a big Travis Jay fan. Been very excited about Jay. You and I both internally have some concerns. Had some concerns about Jay, Tate, some of the more talented kids that you've signed, and just where they were in the developmental cycle because of injuries or whatever the reason. Haven't had a chance to really progress. Travis Jay appears to have an accelerated learning curve on that cycle and appears to be a lot closer to being the player that we think he can be, and hopefully everything's in a place for him to really succeed, because if he can put all his focus and attention there, it's certainly all the talent in the world.
2 more names for you. I was told that Parchment had a good catch, so that's encouraging after some reports of maybe not a great trip over to Jacksonville there for him. They really need him not to be a superstar, although if he wants to do that, that would be awesome. But they need him to be able to replace, as we spoke about in the receiver preview, which you guys should go back and listen to if you want. But they really need him to be at least somebody who can replace Tamarian Terry as far as have the deep speed, be somebody the defense has to respect a little bit, not be a zero out there. And I mean, he may be able to do that. We'll see. Other name I want to throw out here, Keir Thomas is a guy that, just to be frank, if I had to record the defensive line preview 2 weeks ago, I would have been more concerned because he was injured a lot of the offseason. We really didn't know what they were going to get in him. And if he's healthy, I've watched him play a lot. I mean, ever since he was in high school. We'll save it for the defensive line preview, but like, he's there. He played in the scrimmage. He had some impact plays in the scrimmage. Like, that's a good sign. If he's healthy, I think he is probably a starter for you. So that's encouraging.
Definitely. I think he is most likely a starter, and by all accounts has had a strong showing. So hopefully the health stays there, but a guy that I think the average fan will notice who that guy is pretty quickly. And he wears a cool number, so that helps. And he number 4. It's great. It's a great number for defensive lineman, definitely. So
it really is.
Flashes of Timmy Jernigan. I know Jernigan was 8, but you give me a single-digit defensive lineman, I'm a fan. So we got 0 and 4 on the defensive line, and expect big things from them.
No doubt about it. So you mentioned Timmy Jernigan. That's kind of a legend in the FSU program, and something else which is pretty legendary is legendary home loans. 844 FSU loan. That's 844 FSU loan. Figure we get this ad read out of the way before we jump into the offensive line season preview. I did my mortgage and my refi through these guys. Shannon and Chad are awesome. It's interest rates, knowledge of the market, great customer service, attention to detail. 844 FSU loan. Tell them we sent you, and let's get 200, man. We're getting close.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Any other thoughts from the scrimmage before we go full offensive line, bud?
Not really, man. I just, from what I was told, like pretty encouraging overall about the defense. I mean, you got to remember the defense was pretty poor last year, right? Jordan Travis. I think the biggest thing here is that the people I'm talking to are not the folks who I think who would just totally BS me and be like, "Oh, look, Jordan Travis is playing well," just because Mackenzie Milton is not lighting the world on fire, right? Like they're not just sunshine pumpers who are looking for any kind of positive narrative. They do think that he is throwing the ball better. Now, look, they were 121st in passing efficiency last year, adjusted for opponent. I think there was 127 teams because UMass or UConn, New Mexico State, and who was the third team that sat out? Old Dominion, I guess.
Not gonna act like I have any ideas.
Yeah, it was Old Dominion. I'm pretty sure now. So
ODU. There you go.
All right. If you're 121st, that means there were only 6 teams worse than you at passing efficiency adjusted for opponent last year. So there's a lot of room to improve of throwing the football around, quite obviously. But I think the main thing is look, do I think you're going to beat some of these better teams if Jordan Travis is your QB? I have my doubts, right? Although you did do so to North Carolina last year. But if Jordan Travis is a better passer and this defense takes some sort of step forward, you shouldn't be getting blown out by Louisville and teams like that, right? You should be more in those games. Those games become the coin flips that we want them to be.
Hopefully. I mean, I think I love some of the optimism that I see from people, and that just comes at this time of year. But I almost think that people, and last year was such a bizarre year in general that people have kind of pasted over some of the cracks in their mind as to what some of the results from those games are. And I love it when I see people just list 6 teams and go, "Oh, those should be automatic victories,"
including 2 teams who beat you by like 7 touchdowns or like 5 touchdowns last year.
They didn't beat you; they embarrassed you. So. That's just a comment out there. So, should we start at tackles and kind of work our way in?
Yeah. Well, first I want to just review what we did last year real fast. We starting in that 2018, we said, hey, this is going to be like, let's go from terrible to bad to below average. Did FSU get to below average last year? I don't know. I think you can argue that in some ways they did. The offensive line run blocking certainly improved. And yet, I'm just going to be honest, guys. I don't have all the answers here. I have a difficult time figuring out like just how much better this team was at run blocking than it was compared to the prior year for 2 reasons. Number one, Jordan Travis. Before Jordan Travis came in there, FSU really could not run the football at all. So I don't want to give all of the credit here to the offensive line when I really think a lot of this was J-Trav doing stuff for them. The second thing I want to point out is that they had a lot of rushing yards in situations when they were like, it's not technically to the garbage time definition yet, but like they're down 24 points in the third quarter, and if you get down 25, then you kind of enter garbage time. But I think a lot of teams, even though that's not the statistical definition of garbage time, if you use Bill Connolly's new one, if you're an opposing defensive coordinator, you're probably like, all right, yeah, we'll let you run the ball some. So I do wonder like, how well can they throw it when they have to throw it, and how well can they run it when they have to run it in those situations where the game is late and close. How good can they be there? They were 93rd in pressure rate allowed, and that's despite the fact that you have Travis. Now, granted, part of that's on him too. I mean, he's not the most, what would you say? Maybe not the most rhythmic passer, perhaps.
Certainly wasn't fair. Last year.
Yeah. But yet, like, I have a hard time thinking this offensive line is going to be worse unless he just gets absolutely wrecked by injury, because the only guy who you don't bring back portaled himself. Right.
Right.
Or tampered himself. So it's like, what do you? I think this line should be better. There are spots on his team that don't bring back a ton of experience, but you get Robert Scott now. I guess we'll get into the players, but first we should probably talk, like we do in all these season preview spots, where David Hale has them, just to set the tone of kind of our thing. And then we'll talk about the guys who need to step up. They're going to hit this projection or hopefully exceed the projection. And Hale has them 11th in the ACC, ahead of who's ahead of them. Let's take a look here. Syracuse, Pitt, and Georgia Tech. So a team that's probably going to fire its coach. I don't know what the hell Pitt is doing. And a team that's transitioning off the triple option. Year 3. But still, 11th didn't last. 11th, and Hale had the receivers last.
Yeah. So we've previewed units that were 14 to 14 already. And good to see you're at 11. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about beyond 21 at the end of the year, but the steps are being taken to not have you ranked 11th in the ACC anymore, and that is very exciting. I think that's, again, we'll let this breathe throughout the course of the show. I feel like that's probably a pretty accurate rating. And if there has been one disappointing feature of Florida State in the transfer portal, it's that for as excited as all the fan base got every time you saw a tweet about a kid answering the portal at OT next to his name, for one reason or another, you failed to bring in a real tackle. And that is, still left you kind of living in this precarious situation where if you suffer an injury, maybe you can suffer one injury. Certainly if you have 2, you're in a real bad place. And that can be said for a lot of position groups, but for a fan base that's lived with horrible defensive lines horrible offensive lines for 4 years now, you're getting it done at the high school level. Like we said, it's not going to be the case for much longer, but you still left yourself in a situation where things could go pretty astray here pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Alex Atkins is doing an absolutely phenomenal job with this group overall. FSU, I think we were first to report, they just released his contract. They locked him up, for multiple years, and I don't think he's going to go be an offensive line coach anywhere else, right? I think he's going to be a coordinator at some point. And if Kenny Dillingham were to leave, offensive line coach, Alex Atkins could probably take over that offensive coordinator job. And in fact, I would think it's probably odds on that he would. But they did gamble and lose, right? I think they passed on some kids early on who at the very worst would probably have depth. Most notably the offensive tackle from Memphis, right? Now, look, I think anybody with common sense has to say, but Mike Norvell literally coached this kid. They have a huge needed offensive tackle, and they didn't go after. He went to TCU, where I think he's going to start for TCU. Now, I'm going to assume the staff knows something. And I mean, don't you think that's fair to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt on a player they coached?
Certainly, yeah.
But there were other guys, who they decided not to go after. They didn't want to take somebody just for depth purposes. They wanted to take somebody who they thought could come in and potentially start for them. And ultimately, they didn't get one at the offensive tackle spot. So that's really disappointing. The depth here is still pretty sketchy. I think their best offensive tackle right now, and depending on some injury recovery situations, as we record this, late night on 8:15, their best offensive lineman could be Robert Scott.
If I would start with Love Taylor, but yeah, I mean Scott is in the conversation certainly, or looks to have put himself in the conversation. One of the few guys that came back in excellent shape and has been a full buy-in in the strength program. But yeah.
So, last year he had some weird numbers, right? If you look at like ESPN's basically blown block percentage, he was pretty bad in that. But he was also a true freshman playing offensive tackle. When, according to my sources, the program sees him long-term, like what's his NFL projection, maybe what's his high-level college football projection, probably more as a guard. So he's playing offensive tackle for them. getting thrown out there to the Wolves, and no surprise he struggled some. But if you look at Pro Football Focus's numbers, they were extremely high on him. So I do think there's some real flashes here. He's been playing left tackle as well in camp, which we should probably take a moment to discuss this. On the one hand, that's a hell of a compliment to him. Both your quarterbacks are righties, right? And you're protecting the blind side. Guy's in good shape. He looks like he could take a big-time leap this year. But it also has me with some questions about the guy who was unquestionably the best offensive lineman on your team last year when healthy, Devontae Love-Taylor, who is back at practice but not really taking contact yet. You know what I mean? Like he had the rehab all summer with the leg injury. I don't know, man. That makes me a little bit questionable as to where Love-Taylor is in the recovery, how much he was able to do this summer, because for the most part, he's been doing a little more guard stuff than I anticipated him doing. Is that because they feel great about Robert Scott and Darius Washington, or is that more of he may not be the same player athletically that he was last year? Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's a great question. I think that I think your concerns are warranted. I'll put it that way. And that maybe you're trying to protect him a little bit at guard. And also, I mean, there's multiple reasons for that, in my opinion. Some of it, I think, is to try to figure out what your best five are, try to motivate people, let one kid know that he's really got to work to start, let a transfer know that it's not guaranteed that he's going to start. I think you're not playing mind games, but you're trying to figure out where it can hit and what you've got to do to get the best five on the field and get the most out of your best five. But Scott is a really solid piece that they think is a great locker room guy and has worked his tail off when it comes to working with Storms. So on the long haul, I think they're pretty happy with what they got out of the kid out of Arkansas so far. Darius Washington's the next one that we need to look at. Washington had some nice moments last year. You could certainly tell that he was, a work in progress and that he was battling an injury at times as well. I think, again, talking about two redshirt freshmen to lead off the conversation here, Washington will be a really good player. I think Washington will be, one of the main pieces that continues to let you tick from below average to decent, hopefully here rather quickly. But it's going to be a story as to how healthy this kid can be and if he can get through a full season or what it looks like with him, because there's some nice moments. He's got a decent amount of he's got a decent amount of length despite not being super tall. I guess if that's a good
way to put that.
Describe him. And better run blocker right now than pass blocker, but got to get a little bit better working with his feet and maybe not lunging. And there's a kind of center of gravity thing there that comes into play that hopefully you continue to see some improvement.
No doubt, dude. Look, if he stays healthy, I think he can be arguably their best tackle, right? He is a longer guy. He's not real tall, but was it Jimbo? I'm trying to think who told me. I remember it was one of the coaches on that. I think it was on the 09 staff. We were talking about LaMarcus Joyner, and he basically said, like, you don't catch interceptions with your head, right? You catch them with your hands. Kind of the same thing. You block people with your length. And Darius Washington, wingspan wise, is much longer than his height would suggest. I mean, he's not one of these 6'5" dudes. He's probably, what do they even list him at?
I think they have him at 6'4".
6'4". So I mean, that's maybe, let's just say that's generous by a half inch or something, right? He doesn't have a 6'3.5" inch wingspan. He's got something that's, I think it's like a +5. So that's encouraging. He's got some length to him. Last year, I just think he was battling injury, and it's just tough to throw a guy in the fire, ask him to play tackle like that. That's kind of one of the reasons why I have some hope for this, right? These dudes, it would be hard, unless they get hurt or something, it would be hard for them to play worse than they did last year because they were at new positions that they hadn't done yet really at the college level all that much. And at times, they were okay. Most of the times when they played a good team, they got smoked. So it is what it is. FSU does a pretty good job protecting them with play action, with the RPO game, with a super mobile quarterback I mean, we'll see what happens. Probably more RPO stuff when Milton's in there, as opposed to the mobile quarterback stuff. But I just think long term, I mean, Robert Scott, Darius Washington, they're probably going to be starters for you for what? At least 2 more years after this? Unless one of them just absolutely catches fire and goes pro early like that, you're going to have some very experienced dudes who have a ton of snaps under their belt being pushed by some really talented younger kids who are coming in.
Yeah.
COVID is not a good thing.
Hit a home run in the portal. These guys are starters for probably 2 to 3 years. And then, like we will probably reiterate with almost every position preview this summer, this COVID stuff is going to make all these guys feel like they've been on campus for 7 years. I mean, the fact that we're talking about 2 redshirt freshmen is, it's just going to be interesting to see how the roster plays out and how long guys are here. Before we move to Devonta Love-Taylor, did Chaz Neal ever land anywhere? And I'm not trying to laugh at a kid or anything, but we talked about when he left that we weren't sure, like we were thinking like,
well, he's listed
D2,
at FAU.
D3. FAU? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But look, I don't know if that's scholarship or not, as I've covered quite a bit. A lot of these guys who jumped in the portal, maybe without a parachute, they are, I know of other instances across the sport. I'm not saying Chaz Neal did this, just to be clear. I don't know if he's on scholarship or not there. Maybe he is. If he is, that's great for him. Like I don't have any ill will against him. But some of these dudes are taking walk-on spots at FBS schools to avoid the embarrassment of going down, in their mind, embarrassment. I don't think it's necessarily all that embarrassing if you're getting playing time. The quote-unquote embarrassment of, of going down an FCS or a D2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you mentioned something. I want to ask you about this. If Love-Taylor is healthy, and if he got a full normal offseason, do you think he's still taking snaps at guard?
It's possible, Bud, because I do think that that's where they wanted him to land eventually. I mean, I think that was the desire. Really, I thought the desire was to get a plug and, obviously, everybody would love to get a plug and play tackle and slide Love-Taylor down. That didn't happen, as we've already discussed. So I do, it's possible that they really love what they have with Scott and Washington, and they want to go ahead and invest the snaps in those guys with the idea of their, trajectory and there being long-term options at tackle. So I don't want to completely, rule it out, but I'll say the same thing I said earlier. I think the concern is warranted as to if you're trying to, I don't know if protect a kid is the right word, but not, put him in a place where he can succeed as much as possible as to where he is right now. And, we'll just have to kind of keep our ear to the train tracks and see what we hear. And then most importantly, what he looks like once, you start taking real snaps, and we'll have to see where he really is coming off the injury and what he looks like compared with last year. So, whatever you do, you try to get, like I said, you try to maximize what you can put out there, and you try to put your best face forward. And whether that's trying to find 5 guys on an offensive line or working with people that can optimize your business in the best manner possible, that's what we are so fortunate to do. And we've been able to pair with Congrat for a year now. Like we are so fond of bragging on them. If you're looking for a PEO, certainly they are the first people to call. You can reach Matt Lewis at Noles, Noles, at congruityhr.com. And I know this is not the ad read, but we got to give a quick pause here and congratulate Matt Lewis and his son McLean. They are on their way to Williamsport. They are going to the Little League World Series. They are representing, the Southeastern United States. There's a little bit of a different format this year because there's no international teams. So it's all U.S. teams, and they played really great. Played in the final game, which ultimately this year gets you entry into Williamsport, as I said, because there are no international showings. But just a fantastic, I can't even imagine what the experience has been like for the Lewis family. And we want to give them a big shout out and congratulations and wish them the best as they continue on in their Little League World Series pursuit and travel up to Williamsport for a time that certainly all of them will remember for the rest of their lives.
No doubt, man. That is just absolutely incredible. I was watching a little bit of that on TV over the weekend, and what I mean, that like I don't know, we should do something for him. That's pretty cool. I guess give him a shout out on an extremely popular Florida State podcast is maybe good enough. But that's awesome.
That is fantastic.
I'll use our ticker feature on YouTube. Matt, and
I'm sure that'll mean the world to McLean. Yeah,
will. All right.
Some old guys put my name on their podcast. I don't know what's going on. But yeah. All right, so we'll move to the inside guard. We just talked a lot about Love Taylor and how he projects here if it is ultimately where he lands. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see what happens with Gibbons and our old friend Dante Lucas. So Lucas is still on the team at this moment. I'm not trying to suggest any, I'm not hinting at anything, although I would kind of put Lucas in the camp where if I woke up tomorrow and realized he wasn't on the team, or if I woke up in 3 weeks, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me at this point. When Dante Lucas is good, he's real damn good. And when he's not, he can be a concern and is, he's one of those kids that EKGs a lot. It's when it's high, it's real high. And when it's low, you're worried if he's going to bounce back from it.
I really want Dante Lucas to do well, man. I really do. Like, I always enjoyed interviewing him. I like to watch him at camps. I definitely got hooked on like his good blocks were really, really good ones. And we still see that, right? Like he has the ability to finish people in a way that other folks on this team just do not. There's a reason he's still around. Physically, I think his potential is tantalizing. It's all the other stuff, right? It's the, having a like missed assignment percentage double everybody else in the run game that is concerning. It's trying to fight opponents before the game, and just like a game that you go to lose by 40, like just, some of the nonsense and just keeping him sort of neutral thinking, right? Not getting too high, like you said, not getting too low. I think to his credit, he showed up in better shape for fall camp than he was in summer. I'm not going to tell you he's in great shape, but I do think he slimmed down, some, which is encouraging. And like if Washington and Scott are your starting tackles, and you get Devontae Love Taylor, who we think at the very least is going to be pretty steady as a guard. If Dante Lucas is your other guard and he beats out a guy like Dylan Gibbons and then another backup like Bavion Johnson who's playing some guard, like maybe that's a good sign. Maybe that means he kept it together. That's possible. I don't know, dude. He ability-wise, he certainly has it. What technically is he a redshirt sophomore now, I guess? I'm trying to think now. He would be so he's a redshirt sophomore. So technically, if Dante Lucas really got it together, he could be starting for this team for 3 more years, which is kind of crazy to think about. But it's possible. It's possible. You can't get caught up in talking about all the good and ignore, some of the really bad. I mean, PFF grade last year under 50. That's by far the worst of any starter on offense. Just baffling missed assignments, penalties, just stuff that you can't have. It's not a physical strength deal for the most part. It's all the head stuff.
Yeah, it is. And you can see it. You can almost see it unraveling when it happens in a game, and you realize, like we said, when he's on, he's probably the best offensive lineman when you have. And when he's not on, you can almost predict a blown assignment or a personal foul will be coming in the next 4 or 5 plays. You can just kind of see a kid almost boil over in front of you. So hopefully, you continue to work with him and continue to put him in a place to succeed as much as possible. And I do think Gibbons is I think it's a good thing for Lucas to have a kid, to have a guy like Gibbons on the roster that came in with the intention of playing. And Lord knows if he's the only offensive line the staff brought in, I hope they brought him in with the intention of playing him, or at least with him having the ability to play. So Gibbons is experienced as much as a backup can be. A career backup can be experienced. Not super athletic. Maybe didn't show up in quite the shape that you would want him to.
Yeah, he looks heavy.
Yeah.
Florida Heat is a good it's a good opportunity to drop some pounds.
That will help, certainly. But work to be done there. Not a guy that you automatically pencil in. And I think we said this in the intro to the position preview. And I've heard some similar feedback. Some guys that aren't sure he's going to play, and some guys who think ultimately he'll probably win the other guard position if Love Taylor's your other guard. So, some work to be done here. We'll just have to see. I mean, he's probably, he's decent in the pass game, not necessarily at this point in time, great at going out and aggressively pursuing backers or being a strength in the run game.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can anchor, one-on-one blocks against some of the lesser offensive linemen in the conference. Maybe so. I think the questions here are most likely the foot quickness, right? I just don't think he's very athletic, personally. I'm going over some of his advanced numbers here. Last year, 105 snaps, 4.8% pass rush rate allowed was the highest on Notre Dame's team. So kind of concerning there. Just we're not sugarcoating this thing. It's not what we do here. Interceptions plus incompletes attributed to 2, which tied for the lead for the most. Blown block percentage 1.9%, which looks like second worst. Some guy named Josh Lugg, who had 238 snaps for them. Blown block percentage of 2.5. So anyway, Notre Dame is a really, really good offensive line. I do think that Dylan Gibbons probably is a starter caliber player for a number of Power 5 teams. To compare some of those, like I was just talking about, 2.5 was the highest blown block percentage on Notre Dame's team last year. All right. Robert Scott, 3.8. Darius Washington, 5.1. Who else do we have here? Chaz Neal, 6.3. This is like the darkest red cell I've ever seen on a spreadsheet. So that's concerning. Dante Lucas, 1.9% in the run game. Like not even counting the pass, which is, you just don't really see that. Dylan Gibbons is experienced. I think that at the very least, he will most likely not blow a bunch of assignments. And that sort of sets a floor for that position. If Dante Lucas is going to start over him, he has to be better mentally. He cannot be just totally whiffing on who to block anywhere near as often as he was. And I don't think this is an Alex Atkins issue, right? Because other guys on the team were not really doing that. When Washington and Robert Scott were blowing blocks, for the most part, they just got beat. They weren't really didn't know who to block. So I think Gibbons will give you a decent, hey, I'm an experienced guy. I know how to run these concepts. I may not run them all that well, but the baseline should be higher than it was for the spot last year. Let me throw this at you. What if Love Taylor really steps up here in the final 2 weeks of fall camp and makes big time strides? Maybe how they're holding him out more is just precautionary. Do they move Washington or do they move Scott back to guard? Because all three of those guys need to be starters, in my opinion. Like I don't care where they start, but like who do you think they would move?
If you think Scott ultimately is a guard, then that would make more sense. I personally like Scott.
But he might be your best tackle now.
Yeah, I mean, I liked him a little bit more than Washington. I think Washington. The problem is you got 3 kids who may project better at guard than they do tackle. You just got to try to figure out which one it is. Look, these coaches know infinitely more about football than I do. When I saw Robert Scott a week ago, that looked more like a tackle than Darius Washington to me. So I would probably move Washington down and have Scott and Love Taylor be your two tackles.
That's fair. Bavion Johnson is the other name here, probably to mention.
Old Bavion Baked Chicken Johnson. I got to get that reference in one final time. Yeah, oh yeah. Old, I believe that was Trickett Whisper in his ear way back when to give you an idea as to how long he's been on the roster.
So for the listeners who don't know, the baked chicken reference, were we doing the interview with him back when I was still with TN? I remember him describing what his mom made for the official visit dinner, and because Trickett had been really riding Bavion to get the weight down, they served baked chicken, and he made sure to. Isn't this how this went?
Yeah, this is exactly what I remember.
So they pointed out that he was serving baked chicken.
Trickett, Trickett cracks me up. But Trickett would call these kids literally the second after their fax came in and be like, "Hey, fatty, you're gonna hate me and you're gonna lose some weight, and guess what? The tables just turned." And Trickett, what a legend!
Can you imagine if Trickett was the offensive line coach in like the wide open portal era?
Oh yeah.
I mean, your attrition rate would be
losing a kid every 6 days. Good Trickett, man. Good for him. What a guy. What a guy.
So we got to talk about center probably. Maurice Smith. Best I know is going to be your center.
Yeah. I mean, I really liked what I saw out of Maurice at times last year. Looked like a guy that was a little undersized and pushed into action too early, which probably accurate. But a kid who looked like he had a lot of fight in him. I think in a couple years this could be a really decent player for you. But he's going to have to see how you continue to develop him. But there were some moments with Smith where I saw like an engine there that I haven't seen out of too many of the offensive linemen. I really think that kid fights like hell and, wants to be as good as he can be. And it'll be interesting to see what his development looks like.
Sorry. I was trying to breathe and yawn at the same time. That was bad. Not because Ingram was boring me. Just, you're trying not to like breathe like deep in the, yeah. Okay. I like Maurice Smith coming out of high school. I thought he was a pretty athletic kid, bends well. He not like a freaky athletic player, but a little bit undersized, just somebody who knows how to play the position and knows how to win, which is a bit of a cop-out to say like, oh, he's a winner. But ultimately, I do think that's kind of what he is, right? He's somebody who does a lot of the little things right as he continues to gain size.
Being a winner will get you a camp invite to the Jags. So, just don't shy away from using the term too much.
That was embarrassing. But I don't know. I can't hate on Tinty that much. I think that guy's just like authentically him. It's just like that's who the dude is.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to kind of give a little credit, by the way, to Bavion Johnson, who graded out fairly well last year compared to some other people on the team. And it looks like he's in better shape than he's ever been in. I know everybody's always in the best shape of their life entering camp, of course, which if you're not, unless you were hurt, there's something wrong because you're still developing as an athlete. And at 22, you better be in better shape and looking better than you did at 21 or 20 than 19. I mean, of course, but he graded out fairly well last year. I think Bavion is not quite as bad as some people want to give him credit for. Now, the snapping for him has always been an issue. They also have Bryson Estes there. I know Georgia kid up your way who pretty good weightlifting numbers, did not play good competition at all in high school, but we'll see. I mean, has some potential there, I think. But ultimately here, your starter is Maurice Smith. My number one worry with Maurice Smith is when you have a 0 or a 1 tech lined up over him, does he have enough ass to anchor, right? Can he hold up at the point of attack and not just get pushed back into the quarterback? For a center, he had a relatively high number of interceptions and incompletions attributed to him, which is not great. And interestingly here, if you compare his run blocking grade to his pass blocking grade, there's a little bit of Ryan McMahon going on here. Remember McMahon, like back in the day, fairly athletic, came in as a defensive tackle, was not a good player, but was not terrible. Trickett definitely liked him. And ultimately, he could get the cutoffs. He was pretty good in the open field. He was not a bad double team player. But in the pass game, if you had somebody who could bull rush him, he was in real trouble. And that, I think, is where some of this real bad grade for Smith comes from. I know he's put on some weight. I saw him in person, but like, what do they list him at now? 280. That's just not big enough yet.
Yeah. No.
That'll probably continue to be a trouble spot if they like to the extent they play some teams who have some really good nose guards who can walk you back. That's problematic.
All right, we'll move our thoughts, beyond 2021. Talk about some of these kids that we didn't otherwise mention. Lloyd Willis is the first one that we'll tip on, redshirt freshman. I mean, a guy that you always knew was going to need some time in the program before he was really ready to develop. A guy that I think internally they're fairly optimistic about what he can be in time, but a guy that you're still probably a year away from really seeing play a decent amount of snaps.
What a difference framing matters, right? Like, how do we frame you as a player? If Lloyd Willis is somebody who they had thrown in as a freshman, as you've had to do in this program so many times over like the last 6 or 7 years, throwing in guys before they're ready, he would look terrible, almost certainly. And that would be bad. But yet now they're actually optimistic about Lloyd Willis developing into something here. I think if you go back to the original Nolecast, like the after National Signing Day, when we talked about him, when they signed him in the class of 2020, we said basically talk to us in 2022. This kid needs a redshirt year to get bigger, get stronger, and probably 2 years to learn how to play the game before he's seriously competing for playing time. But do you know what would really help? Man, if he could arrive a year early, just to give you some confidence that he could be a backup at offensive tackle this year, and like maybe he's your fourth or fifth tackle, and you feel not horrendous about putting him in the game. Like, if I can refresh your memory here, Ingram, Casneal, the pass block grade of 44 on PFF, not the best, and pass rush percentage allowed there by Neal. The only guy who has a higher pass rush percentage allowed than Chaz Neal last year is Ja'Kai Douglas, right? Who that's just like a receiver playing running back, blowing blocks in the backfield. Chaz Neal, 20% pass rush rate allowed, which is, next closest offensive lineman, 7.3, Darius, who's playing hurt. Neal is like triple that. If Lloyd Willis can give FSU not Chaz Neal level offensive tackle play as a backup in year 2, I think they will take that all day, man. That would be great.
Super raw prospect out of Miami. Like you said, we always knew he was going to, need 2 years. Probably needs to slide over to Matzo and eat as many fat fingers and, pancakes as he can. Still kind of a long, lengthy looking prospect. But a guy that I think, there's still some optimism. And I say like he's been around the program for 3 years or something. No, there's still a good idea as to what ultimately that kid can become. Before we go to Thomas Schrader, we will talk real quickly about Matzo. We've mentioned this a couple times over the past episodes. We will be doing a listener appreciation for the Louisville game. So you can go ahead and put that on your calendar. We'll be doing some kind of event with Matzo. Probably, I don't want to say Bobby Bowden themed, as that sounds kind of silly, but we will, a themed anything sounds kind of silly. Let me clarify my comments. I'm certainly not suggesting anything tied to Bowden, but we'll try to do something in tribute to Bowden. Have a great time with you guys. We're working on a t-shirt with Matt and his team right now, and we'll continue to provide you details as they become available. But whether it be that morning or any other time, certainly would love for you to go visit our friends over at Matzo Township, Sodo, all the other fantastic places of the For the Table restaurant group.
And hit up their catering business too.
And the catering business is something to keep in mind. That is a fantastic option if you're in the Tallahassee metro area and you have an event coming up.
All right, so let's go ahead and finish out. Let's finish strong. Here are some dudes who I wouldn't necessarily define them as roulette chips, but maybe for this year, Thomas Schrader is a guy. If he had not busted his leg up,
it'd be one of the first 5 names we mentioned.
Yes, I think he would legitimately be in the conversation for a starting job. If Thomas Schrader did not get hurt, do you take Dylan Gibbons in the portal?
I don't think you do.
I agree.
And I think you probably take I think you probably have a little more leeway for a tackle, actually. I think you maybe, maybe feel a little bit more comfortable doing that. But Schrader is that one hurts because absent injury, I think this guy's a starter for you.
And that's not to say he's going to miss the entire year, but certainly he's missed a whole lot of weightlifting, developmental time, practice time. I mean, he's not going to be a plug and play good player the second he gets back. I think long term they're still very high on him, and I know that they like him a whole lot, and we're bummed when they found out what that was. But man, like if he can come back, could he be an average ACC player by the end of the year? They would take that. Like you need to find some spots. I don't hate the starters on this team. I don't think. I do kind of hate the backups, and part of that is because of injury. I don't hate them as people, but I just hate their ability level and the indigestion it gives me thinking about certain guys having to go into the game for long stretches. But if Thomas Schrader can come back mid-year and be just a below-average ACC player, that would be great, right? That'd be helpful. I think long-term, he's still very much in the plans. Zane Herring, I think, has to continue to reshape his body, and we'll see how that goes. Brady Scott, is Brady Scott really a redshirt junior? There's no way. Yeah, I guess Brady Scott feels like he's been here for 9 years. So he was on the
used to that failing. But yeah.
So 17, 18, 19, 2021, he had the red shirt and he had the COVID shirt. So he could still technically come back next year. My guess here is that Brady Scott will not do so and will probably go get a job after this year because he's not going to be an NFL guy. But somebody you could throw in there probably doesn't kill you as a reserve. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't have had him in the future section because I don't think he's really going to be here beyond next year. And then Rod Orr, I also had in the future section with contributor potential. This year, I feel like it's unlikely because he's kind of got that basketball build. He's very raw as a prospect. But, I mean, he was the gem of their offensive line class last year, and they're still very high on him. So, I mean, obviously, he's been on campus for like 3 weeks. So, yeah, just a reminder of what they have. 2 guys I want to put in the prove me wrong category, Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Goss and Ira Henry.
Yeah. Henry's, one of the just from a physical perspective, one of the kids that I've been the most excited that you've signed over the past 3 years or so. Hasn't translated yet. Haven't heard a whole lot of, ideas that is a guy that's on the verge of contributing. Just at this point in time, I think a category called "Prove Me Wrong" is appropriate, and I think him landing in it is fitting for now. And hopefully that changes. A guy out of East St. Louis with certainly some physical ability that others on this roster don't have. But at this time, not somebody that I would anticipate seeing on the field a whole lot this year.
I would agree about that. And yet I don't think so. Jalen Goss, redshirt sophomore, still has 3 years left, allegedly up to 290 pounds or 295 pounds. He's definitely put on some weight. He was always kind of a dude who they projected to be a long-term project, but just the inability to put on any weight in the first couple of years kind of doomed that. And I still don't think he's gonna play here. But who knows? I mean, crazier things. If Love Taylor has to play guard and you don't want to move him off, it's not insane to think he could be your first tackle off the bench this year. Like there's that kind of variance behind the scenes that could produce those kind of results. This is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. So why don't we take a couple minutes to celebrate / discuss the recruiting efforts that are have taken place at this position. You finally wanted to try to not just diagnose the problem. Lord knows that's a clear diagnosis, but cure it with numbers. And certainly, Florida State is in the process of doing that in a manner that they haven't in a long time. Now, all the respect, personally, I think my co-host is the best guy in the world when it comes to recruiting, but certainly still Steve Wilfong's name carries a ton of weight. And when Wilfong drops a crystal ball, I mean, it's significant enough that we should mention it on a podcast.
No doubt.
I don't know that I do that with a ton of people in the industry, but for those that aren't immediately aware, Wilfong crystal balled one Elijah Pritchett to Florida State. I believe this was Friday morning, so still relatively recently a new occurrence, and that would be a hell of a get for Florida State. A guy that they've certainly, if you go along with the idea of following the visits, this is the only place really that it looks like Pritchett might go with as frequently as he's made his way to Tallahassee. So they've put himself in a great place. It would be a hell of a win. I don't know that he's necessarily been a priority for programs like Georgia and Alabama, but he's on their board, and there's schools that you've had to battle, and you've just done a great job developing a relationship. And hopefully we're not getting in front of ourselves here, but by all accounts, you have put your place in a fantastic spot to get a signature from this kid come December. And it would be, yet another big feather in the hat of a recruiting class, particularly along the offensive line, that will change the fortunes and hopefully, not having us do preview podcasts where the offensive line is 11 out of 14 in the ACC for much longer.
I think they're going to get this thing right. I really do. Part of it is just it's hard to be this bad this long without a lot of bad luck. You've had a lot of attrition. You've had a lot of injury issues. At some point, you're not going to keep hitting that same negative parlay, right? Recruiting is a huge part of that. If they can get Pritchett, that's a huge deal. I mean, they could sign one of the absolute best offensive line classes in the country. If you get all these kids to verbally commit, I guarantee you some will decommit, and those are probably the kids who would have transferred early because they weren't getting enough playing time anyway, which is kind of what you want to do, to weed them out before you have to use a signing spot and then have them transfer out. I think things are looking up here. I just don't know if they're going to take a huge step this year. I could absolutely see things take a huge step in 2022, though. Yeah. Right? I mean, you lose Love Taylor, but Scott, Washington, if Lucas is still around if he's still around, I'm going to assume he's bought in, and that could be a nice guy to unlock there. Murray Smith could be heavier. You could get one, maybe two of Lloyd Willis Schrader really stepping up. Who knows? Maybe like an absolute miracle happens and Jalen Goss is a viable player or something. But I could see, and obviously he's one of the true freshmen stepping up. Maybe Rod Orr is ready to play after just a year on campus. I really do think 22 could be a big step. I don't know. I'm not crazy confident that they're going to be a whole lot better than 11th in the ACC out of 14. But it wouldn't shock me if they're like a spot or two better.
Yeah,
there's some other teams collapse potential.
I mean, I think it's pretty accurate for where you are right now, and we'll see. But like you said, the real story here is what they've done towards addressing the future, both on the recruiting trail and contractually, signing up or getting a guy to commit to you long term from a contractual standpoint, and a guy that's not going to go coach offensive line anywhere else. And certainly been, one of two assistant coaches that have absolutely jumped off the page as far as the ability to get work done on the recruiting trail. And, there were some flashes from this group last year, so it'll be interesting to see how much they progress. Certainly been a, burden to the program for quite a while, but an area that, like you said, I think they're going to get right. I think they're taking the steps to getting right. And 2021 will be a very interesting year to see, how far along they get in that process.
No doubt, man. We are right at an hour.
Right at an hour. A little preview, and then did some scrimmage, so we can, justify that as to why this one's a little bit longer than maybe we desired. But that, that happens sometimes. So, like I said, we are on YouTube. We'll point you in that direction. You can just search the Nolecast. You'll find us pretty quickly. If you could find the time to give us a subscription there, it would mean a lot. Otherwise, feel free to rank us or give us a ratings, subscription.
On Apple, hit up our Patreon, patreon.com/Nolecast. Drop us a line, nolecast@gmail.com.
You can text me. I'll give you Bud's address. You can knock on his door.
my P.O. box.
Yeah, tell him how much you appreciate it. I'm sure his wife would love that. But no, so certainly appreciate the listen. We'll be back with you with another position preview soon. And for now, that's been the Nolecast.